Aaron with Quality Service today again here in Mebane, North Carolina. I just wanted to do a real quick video on some of North Carolina's codes as far as water heaters and crawl spaces go. There again, jurisdictions do regulate things a little differently, but I'm going to kind of go over the basis. If you got feedback, leave me a message. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Trying to get more of these videos, kind of educate people. One of the biggest things is a pad. When you put a water heater in a crawl space like this low boy here, you can no longer have bricks. If it is bricks, it has to be cemented together, more or less a non-impervious surface. Water heater pad's usually the simplest way. It cannot be below grade on the water heater. In other words, the pad can be level with grade if you have to dig it out. Because these low boys are now bigger, usually size-wise taller. They have more insulation in them. A 40 is still a 40 gallon, but they have more insulation, so they're bigger. So sometimes you got to put the pad down level with the ground, but the heater can't be below grade. If it is sitting down, there has to be a drain out so it can't flood the heater. If it can flood the heater, it'll do nothing but cause issues. So with that being said, the other thing is if it's more than 30 foot, about 20 foot, it has to be 7 foot clearance walking to it, so it needs to be relatively close to the crawl space door. The other thing is the crawl space door, it has to be able to fit through it without modification. So if it won't fit through the door, the crawl space door either needs enlarged or it needs relocated. Needs to have a thermal expansion tank. For water heaters, you know, hot water expands, thermal expansion. This tank has an air bladder inside it that absorbs the expansion. This tank is supposed to be set to the incoming water pressure. So after the pressure regulator, we know that state code also says that water pressure can't be over 80 psi. So you're gonna have a pressure regulator, you're gonna have your expansion tank, and also your temperature pressure relief. I'll probably get more into how these things all operate together, but they all three work together. You can have your expansion tank just anywhere on the home on the cold water system. So if it won't fit on top of the heater like this one, you can strap it up, connect it to the cold water supply. Your connections, they have to be a dielectric connection. North Carolina State Code says brass is a dielectric connection. So we have brass T, brass PEX adapter here. You can run PEX legally to the top of an electric heater because you do not have a vent that is going to cause heat issues with the PEX piping. I'll get more on that when I'll make a video on gas water heaters and what's going on with that. So you got your expansion tank, you got your pad. We know it's going to fit through the crawl space door. We're going to take measurements. You got plenty of clearance on top. Cold water valve, cold water supply valve is in the back here. This cold water supply valve just needs to be accessible. Needs to be, you know, right there at the heater is the best place. This one has one on the hot and the cold, so it can be isolated. Electrical disconnect box. If the heater is not in sight of the electric panel, it has to have a way to shut power off. It can be a form of things. It could be a light switch. Not typical, but I've seen it on some older homes. Typically, you're going to have an electrical disconnect within reach to service it for safety reasons of somebody working on it. Of course, this one doesn't have the power hooked up, but you need to have your cover panel. You need to have your Romex connectors. You can't have wires just hanging out. That's an electrical fire hazard. The TMP, temperature pressure relief valve, it needs to be piped out of a crawl space. Unless it's just like a walk-in and it's having things stored in it. If it is an actual smaller door crawl space, you can't just open it up and walk in like some of them real tall, all but basement styles. It has to be piped out of the foundation with an air gap. I'm gonna take the camera here and I'll show you the air gap and kind of explain what's going on with that. So you got your air gap. You need to have one pipe diameter distance here. This is a 3/4, so we're not reducing the inner diameter. It'll pass inspection with PEX. I don't recommend that because if you read the code in depth, PEX is reducing the inner diameter, and this is not. This is CPVC. You got to have a metal fitting screwed into the temperature pressure relief valve. 1 pipe diameter distance. This is an 1.5 inch reducer with strap iron screwed to the side of the heater. You can legally do that. We got like 2 inches of insulation, so it's not going into the heater. Then your pipe is running down and out. Reason this air gap is here is because when you run it out, and of course this one's not run like through an actual crawl space. The reason you have to have an air gap is if somebody were to bury that in the mulch, worst case is city has a leak. When you have a leak, things siphon. This air break here, this air gap keeps it from siphoning dirt back into the potable water system. So it's a safety health reason it needs to be like that. I know sometimes codes can be a little asinine, but there is purpose behind it. When you pipe that out and it goes out the crawl space, drill a hole. The hole needs to be sealed. It needs to be silicone, sealed off, rodent protected. From there, it needs to be within 4 to 6 inches of the ground. Just like if you were to pipe this TMP down in a garage, it needs to be within 4 to 6 inches in case somebody's standing next to it, it bursts, it blows off, scalding water comes out. It needs to be in a safe area. You need to have your pipe strapped about every 3 foot is best to help support it all the way out of the crawl space. You can run this thing clear across the crawl space if need be. You want to put it in a logical place. You don't want to dump it out on somebody's cement. That's against code, like their sidewalk, their driveway, things like that. But it's there for safety reasons. If this were to blow loose, it'll flood a crawl space. That prevents that from happening. In a lot of cases, it's good to go ahead and run this, do like a 2 by 1 inch reducer and run it out in 1 inch is a real good practice. You know, there's a difference between code and exceeding code. You know, this is done to minimum code. Exceeding code would be a 1 inch. You'll never have issues with that. So we've got our pad, we've got our thermal expansion tank, we've got our shutoff valve. Exceeding code, there again, we've got isolation valves. We can totally isolate this heater to where if anything were to happen, they still have hot water. We don't have to worry about it. We got our TMP piped out with an air gap out of the foundation within 4 to 6 inches of the ground. If for some reason you can't get the TMP on grade like this, you can run it up, over, and back down into your air gap and then out if you have to get up above the joist. There's nothing, you know, you can do that if you need to because it is pressure. Running it out, you just have to have your air gap and for safety issues. This applies to all lowboy water heaters, and a lot of these codes apply to other types. If you were to put a tankless in a crawl space, your TMP needs to be piped out. Anytime it's piped out to the ground, so if we were in a garage lowboy heater, if you pipe the TMP out, it has to have an air gap. If we're sitting on concrete and impervious surface, it doesn't have to be piped out. It can be piped within 4 to 6 inches of the ground without an air gap. So it's up to you as far as convenience and how it is. If this heater's in a crawl space, what I went over today is exactly how it needs to be. Thanks for watching. This is Aaron with Quality Service Today in Mebane, North Carolina. I hope this helps you out.